Welcome everybody to my channel. This is my first video and I'm gonna address on it AutoMapper and why you should use it, when to use it and when not to use it. And I'm gonna do that analyzing one video from Dan Patrascu, a great content creator that made a long video explaining why you should not use AutoMapper. I want to say first that Dan is an amazing professional. I have nothing against Dan, but I think that his video is completely biased and mistaken in the points that he's making. And I'm gonna address them one by one right now. Let's dive into it. First, this is Dan. This is his channel. If you don't know him, I will link everything on the comment sections. But the first point, let's dive into it.
Don't use AutoMapper. Seriously, just don't. It's not only me who's saying this, even Jimmy Bogart, the AutoMapper creator, says this here, and even here.
Okay, first things to address. Dan mentions 3 different pieces of content that Jimmy posted saying why you should not use the library that I created, basically. He doesn't provide any link to those articles or tweets or anything. But I took the time, I went, I read them, and I have them here with me. So let's take a look at the tweet. He says, I invented AutoMapper to enforce a design convention, not to avoid assignments. If you cannot conform the convention, don't use it. If you can conform the convention, change your design and do not add config. If your config is not 95% auto, don't use it. I think it's clear what he wants with the library that he created and what he wants you to do with it and what he doesn't want you. So if you cannot map transparently one-to-one properties, don't use it. That's it. If you can, do it. Why? We will see that later. Let's go to the next article. Is this entry on his own website? He seems like that's some search on AutoMapper and he found this funny code around AutoMapper. Again, here he addressed specifically this case and talks about why you should not flatten objects in the way that is done here. Why you should not use mapping of properties that has the exact same name on both sides using for-member map from. Because here all of the properties are named exactly the same. So he says, don't do this. The library is called AutoMapper. It will map things automatically if they are named the exact same way. If that's the case for you, use it. Don't write the same code that Dan is telling you to write. That's a waste of time, that's a waste of effort, and it can introduce problems. He is saying, in the case where you have a lot of not mapping, for example here, if you want a salutation, that is the title, a password, that is the password and a date. If you have to ignore some stuff, he's just saying, don't do it. In this case, yes, go and use manual mapping. But I don't know why Dan provided these 2 articles, I couldn't find the other one, saying that Jimmy says don't use AutoMapper. Or why he's not doing the whole sentence and says don't use AutoMapper if you are not supposed to. That should be the right way of saying this. Let's dive now into the next piece of content.
On AutoMapper and the problems that it might cause and what better alternatives we could have, let's take a brief look into a very typical looking AutoMapper configuration like this one.
Okay, let's stop here. What did we just say? If you cannot map automatically 95% or most of your properties, don't use it. So that makes a whole video of why you should not use AutoMapper and talks about it for 16 minutes in a case that should never be used. And that's perfectly fine. So if you want to look at the 60-minute video, go for it. I say it doesn't add too much value because it's doing exactly what you should not be doing with AutoMapper. Probably this video should be called "Don't use AutoMapper if you are doing this," but not "Don't use AutoMapper." Use it if it's the right case. Let's go to the next part when he talks about performance.
Let's set up some benchmarks here. And here's our benchmark class. Let's go briefly through it. So we have two private fields here. First of all, we have an array of product, because in order to kind of like see the performance, we want to do this operation on, a larger array of different products, because this would simulate how our application would behave if we get, for instance, 1,000 requests in 1 second or something like that.
And no, Dan, that is incorrect. What you're simulating here is just mapping in memory of 10, 100, or 1,000 objects. You are not simulating those amounts of requests. Why? Because if your application, it's an endpoint that receives a request and maps something in memory and does not do anything else, then what is your application doing? So this benchmark is not providing any value to this exercise of seeing, oh, should I use AutoMapper or not? So the whole performance that he is testing here doesn't make any sense in real life in the majority of the cases. And why do I say this? Because in the majority of the cases, you're gonna be retrieving something from the database, you're gonna map it to something different, and you're gonna return it to the UI. You're gonna get something from the database, you're gonna map it, and you're gonna pass it to another service. Or you're gonna get something from the UI, you're gonna map it, and you're gonna put it on the database. This case that he is benchmarking is neither of those three cases. So let's take a look at my results of my benchmark. Whoa, what's going on here? AutoMapper is actually faster than manual mapping and allocates less kilobytes on our memory. Why? Why is this happening? Because I created a benchmark that suits most of the times what you're gonna be in real life, which is accessing the database, projecting using AutoMapper, and generating a list. You can see from here that I have a database that has users, every user has an address, and every user has a summary of the post that it makes on YouTube. It has 1,000 entries, and what I do here is basically something simple, is taking 200 of those objects from the database. I am mapping them with AutoMapper and I'm mapping them with manual mapping. What's the problem here? If you do manual mapping, you have to bring all the data in memory and then you have to map it. You are having 2 times the amount of objects in memory that you would like to have. So here is when you have to use AutoMapper. But you have to use it again only if you can map one-to-one the different properties of your classes. Look at my user DTO and look at my user. Exactly the same. I don't have different names where I map. Display name, date of birth, display name, date of birth. Let's go to my profile. Look at my profile. Create map, boom. Create map, nothing else. I just did something silly with the address because I wanted to show that there is no problem of doing that. This is going to be translated into a SQL query, and it has a benefit that my address DTO, which is extremely plain and has a single string, will only have one string in memory, and it's going to go from my database straight to my UI. So again, if you start a project from scratch and you have control of your database schema, you have control of your domain, you have control of DTOs, you have control of your UI, use AutoMapper. Don't use prefixes or suffixes in your properties. Don't do logic in your mapping. A mapping is just that, is what is here has to be there, and don't do any logic. If you do this, I can tell you AutoMapper will save you time. I benchmark this. How long did it take me to do this profile and how long it took me to do this manual mapping, and it took me 5 seconds less to write the profile than to write this. So to summarize, I have to say again, Dan is an amazing professional, but this video with many others of other people that are around on the internet that focus on something specific that is not real in 99% of the cases, which is you do a benchmark in memory, and that's usually not the case. It could be the case when you are about to save into the database, but it's not going to be the case when you have to read data from database. So you have to put in balance what is best for you. Is it time? Is it reusable of code? Do you want to explore new things? All I'm saying is there is a lot of hate against this library. There's a lot of people saying, don't use it, stop using mappers, just go with manual mapping. I say, don't fall into the trap. There is one rule: the less code we write, the better. But with AutoMapper, there is an extremely hate, and they're telling you, write a lot of code. Be a developer that can introduce problems. If you're starting a project from scratch, please stop doing manual mappings. Write schemas that make sense and they are aligned with your DTOs. Use some AutoMapper, save yourself some time, and let's see you in the next video. But before that, please join. You can also visit my other social media profiles. Everything is down there. I hope you like my first video. As you can see, I didn't edit this video. I'm not gonna edit the video. I'm not gonna be a fancy content creator. I just want you to have content that it makes sense and content that is professional.